Assalamu alaikum. Asab, do we know the exact time frame when the promised Messiah ﷺ was born and passed away? Any historical records, accounts to suggest when he passed away, when he was born?
Right, okay, yeah. The answer is yes and no. Yes, we do know when he passed away, 26th of May, 1908. As far as his year of birth, time of birth, or the time frame of his birth is concerned, we must remember that we're talking of a time when there was very little, next to none, kind of, an arrangement of recording births or birth registry. So that has to be borne in mind. So what we know about his birth is an estimation, which we believe is very close to what it actually must have been. So we have an exact date of his birth, of his death, and we have a very close estimation to his year of birth or his birth.
Now, according to a revelation of the promised Messiah ﷺ, God Almighty reveals the time of the death of the promised Messiah ﷺ, and says Samanina Holan, about 80, or Qariba min Zalik, or thereabouts, or Yazidu alayhi sinin, or a few years over 80.
Right.
Now, the promised Messiah ﷺ determines his own age in his own books, an authentic source to determine the age of the promised Messiah, and he says he was born in 1839 or 1840. So according to that, even if he was born in 1839, we know that when he passed away, he was 70 years old. 10-year gap between the time he passed away and the revelation stating that he would pass away when he would be 80.
Right. You're absolutely right. And I think it's one of the allegations that the opponents of the Ahmadiyya Muslim Jamaat like to make, very fond of it. And it's one of those which is, if you class the allegations, it's one of those that fall outside the intellectual, the spiritual boundary. And it's kind of the tail end. When they've tried all other, then they come to these as well to try these. But anyway, yes, the revelation is there. It's recorded. He recorded it himself, saying that this is what God has told me. Like you just said, 80 or around 80. Now this one, Samanina Holland one, we don't know when this was revealed to him, because that's important. But we do know that he's alluded to it in two of his works, one being Arba'in Part 3, and the other one being Tofa Golarviya, where in both the works he states that it was revealed to me about 35 years ago. Now from that, we know that the Arba'in and Tofa Golarviya, both of these books were written and published in the year 1900. So if we go with that, the question you've asked, it entails a lot of arithmetic and calculation. So the viewers also, they might want to at times pause and do their own calculations if they like. So if this book is being published, these both of books being published in 1900, take away 35 years from that, we reach 1865. And that means that his year of birth would have to be 1825, which would mean that at the time of his death, he was
25.
Yeah. But we know that this cannot be the case, because we'll have to see if this is a revelation, and it is a revelation. It has to be at the time of when his age was 40 or after that, because we know from his works that this is where he, and we'll come to that later in a bit, we know that he has very clearly on many occasions said that he had reached the age of 40 when he started receiving revelations from Allah the Almighty. Now, while this one, we don't know when it was revealed to him. Like I said, there's only reference to it in a couple of works. But there is another occasion where the Prophet ﷺ refers to it in very clear-cut terms, and I will keep quoting where I can. And I quote here. This is from his work, Zamima Brahine Ahmadiyya. I'm sure we'll be able to see this on the screen as well, where he says, and the book is published in 1905. We must remember that, 1905. I am now around 70 years of age. God Almighty informed me in clear words that I shall live to see the age of 80, add or take 5-6 years, end quote. So this is the one occasion where he clearly tells us what the revelation actually was and how it is to be understood, right? So,
And he passes away 4 years after that prophecy.
he passes away 3 years after that,
Okay.
right? So he's about 70 years of age then, and then he passes away about 3 years after that in 1908. But he's quite clear when he says 5, 6. Now, this is leaving us with a bracket. Like I said, there's going to be quite a lot of arithmetic. This is leaving us with a bracket. He's 70 years of age. He says, I was told that I'd live to be 80. Give or take 5 or 6. So we're left with a bracket of 74 years of age to 86 years of age, minus 6 and plus 6. So that is the kind of bracket or the time frame that we're working around and trying to establish. And now coming to the other part of your question, where you've said that the Prophet ﷺ has very clearly stated in his work that I was born in 1839, and the one that you just referred to, I will also like to read it, because obviously that is where the confusion comes in, because he writes in his work Kitabul Bariya that मेरी पैदाइश 1839 या 40 की है. I was born in 1839 or 1840. Important is, in the twilight of the Sikh rule, and was in my 16th or 17th year in 1857. Right? Now, what we see here is exactly what I've just spoken about. There was no, it wasn't customary, it wasn't obligatory for anybody to get births registered, and births were not registered. Right?
They were linked to a landmark
They were
event and
linked to,
remembered.
yeah, how it worked was that it was based on how it was remembered. When someone was born was through word of mouth, passed on. Word of mouth was based on memory. Memory was based on memorable events, when such and such happened. So we find two clear references here. One, the twilight of the Sikh Empire, of Ranjit Singh, right? His reign. And 1857, which again is a massive landmark, linked to the mutiny or freedom movement, freedom fight, as some people like to call it. So there are clearly two references. Now, what tells us that this again is estimation is that the Prophet is saying that I was born in 1839 or 40. I was 16 or 17 in 1857. If it was exact, 1839 or 1840 would mean 17 or 18 in 1857, not 16, 17. So this is quite clear that this again is an estimate that is being given, an approximate, kind of working around when he might have been born. Now, why this is important is because we have to see, everybody knows that the Maharaja Ranjit Singh passed away in 1839, and that brought about an end to his reign and his time. But why it could not have been 1839 is because we'll have to go back to the works of the promised Messiah ﷺ again, because we don't want the estimate or the approximate arithmetic that we're doing here or the estimation of the date to be a wild guess or anything. So we'll have to stay around, in or around his works. And that I will have to keep referring and quoting. So he goes on to say that my father had endured huge hardships. This is from Kitab al-Bariya again. Before his birth, before the birth of the Prophet Messiah.
So what were these hardships that the Prophet Messiah faced after the demise of his father?
Yeah, his father. The hardships that his father faced was that, in the time of the Ramgarhia Sikhs, which is before Ranjit Singh, they had looted lands from many people. So the whole huge estate, including Qadian, that belonged to the forefathers of the Prophet ﷺ, were confiscated by the Ramgarhia Sikhs.
Okay.
And this was the difficulty, because they were literally, left homeless, the whole family, the whole clan, and they ended up living in Kapurthala and here and there, almost seeking refuge. And it was in the last few years of Maharaja Ranjit Singh that Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad, the father of the Prophet ﷺ, was handed back the land by Maharaja Ranjit Singh.
In the late 1830s.
Towards the late 1830s, but not 1839, because that is when Maharaja Ranjit Singh actually passes away.
Okay.
Now, and this isn't only from the books of the Promised Messiah. I mean, even Lepel Griffin, who wrote The Chiefs of the Punjab, a very famous work on this topic. I mean, he is written as well, and I can quote a little bit from his work as well. He says, Ranjit Singh invited Mirza Ghulam Mirza to return to Qadian and restored to him a large portion of his ancestral estates. He then, with his brothers, entered the army of the Maharaja, etc. Now, the Prophet ﷺ goes on to say that my father, the late Mirza Ghulam Murtaza, returned to Qadian in the latter part of Ranjit Singh's rule, as he was awarded back 5 villages from his father's estate. In the latter part, not the last year of Ranjit Singh. So we're looking at, somewhere around 1835 and thereon. But has to be before 1839. So 1835 to 1839. We're looking at that kind of a time frame. And then here he's also written in one of his works that, his father used to say that when you were born, all my hardships were gone, and you came as a blessed omen for me. And because before your birth, all my misery, all my problems, and all my agony had been removed from me, i.e., the lands had been restored to him. So that means that it cannot be 1839, right? So it has to be somewhere before that.
So do we have any other authentic sources through which we can determine the actual age? Even the rough estimation should be from an authentic source, his works, his writings, his books.
Absolutely. And yes, I mean, it's important that we remain as authentic as possible, even when we're trying to work this out. So in one of his books, in Ejaz-e-Ahmadi, the Prophet ﷺ writes and addresses, after the death of Abdullah Atham, show me where Atham has gone. He was 64 years old, the same age as me. So 64, if in 1893, Atham was 64 and the Promised Messiah both were 84, so that means he was 76 at the time of his death, 76-year-old, and that takes his year of birth back to 1831, right? We're staying within his work. So anybody coming back with any questions needs to take all of this into account. And then in another work of his, Anwarul Islam, which was published in 1894, he says, and I quote, although I am 60 years of age now, right? End quote. Now, if again in 1894 he is 60 years of age, that means he was born in 1834. Now, so all of this, when the marker is placed around 1830s, the mid 1830s, it exactly corresponds with Samanina Holland and the way it was interpreted and understood by the Prophet ﷺ himself, who was the recipient of this revelation. Now, moving on, when he published a tract, he again mentions, and this is 1894 again, I too am around 60 years of age. Atham and I are both under the same law. Again, it takes back his year of birth, because if in 1894 again, if he's 60 years of age, it goes back to 1834, which, as we've just discussed, again pointing to the mid-1830s. Now, addressing one of his other opponents, Dowie, he wrote to him in English, and this got published in the Review of Religions, and he said, and I quote, I am about 70 years of age. This is 1903, December. So if in 1903, the Prophet Messiah is 70 years of age, that means 5 years on, at the time of his death, he was 75. And this again brings the marker bang on middle of the 1830s. Again confirming how the Prophet Messiah himself understood the Samanina Holland revelation and his life expectancy as it was told to him by Allah the Almighty. And then again in 1905, there is a question answer kind of piece in there where someone asked him, what is your age right now? And he responds by saying, and I translate, that only God knows knowledge of my age, but as far as I know, I am around 70 years of age. As of now, 1323 Hijri, which is 1905. That is when Brahim Ahmadiyya Part 5 was published. So from 1905, he's 70 years of age. 3 years on, he should be roughly 73, 74, according to the Gregorian calendar. Now, coming back to, how he's determined his age of when he started receiving revelation. This again has to be extracted because that's important. Because, Samanina Holland, when was this revealed? A rough estimation of that. And then how he understood it. But it's important to understand. When he says it was revealed to me 35 years ago, we have to see when he exactly sees his age, when he started receiving Allah's revelations. And we know that from this same work, where he clearly states that I had been in this passing world for 40 years when I was elevated through divine revelation. So he was 40 years of age. When was he 40 years of age? Again, we have to go back to his work, Kitabul Bariya, where he states, I spent around 40 years of my life under my father's shelter. As soon as he departed this world, divine revelation started to shower on me with full force.
When did his father pass away?
Yes, that again is important because we'll have to see when exactly he passed away, because then the promised Messiah should be 40 years of age. So in one of his books, Nuzulul Masih, he writes, today, 10th of August 1902, it has been 28 years that my father died. And this takes us back to the year of birth of his father being in 1874. So from 1874, if he was 40 years at the age of that time, that means that when he passed away, he was 74 years of age. So exactly, we're right there at the bracket that we were working towards, 74 to 86. Now, when it comes to, like you said at the start, and it's really important that we try and find answers from his works. So it does actually, his own works help us to narrow down into dates and days and times and weathers. Like, for example, on one of the occasions, he says, this is Tofa Golarvia, I was born on Friday the 14th of a lunar month. Now, this makes it important that because he's keeping a record of his age according to the lunar calendar, it would be best to work out his age at the time of his death according to the lunar calendar, right? So 14th, now this has to be noted, 14th date of a lunar month. This is important. And then another statement recorded in one of his biographies is that, a tradition where Mufti Muhammad Sadiq, one of his companions, he mentions that the Prophet ﷺ once said that he was born in the pagan month of the Punjabi calendar. So now what we're looking for is the 14th day of a lunar calendar. We're looking for a Friday, and we're looking for the Punjabi or the Hindi month of pagan. So it's these three that need to come together for us to be able to arrive at his date and year of birth. We've got the date, we've roughly got the month, and we've roughly got the year. So if we can establish when it was the 14th day of a lunar month, when it was Friday, and when it was the month of pagan, we can easily reach the date of birth, not only the year of birth of the Prophet ﷺ. So that by looking at the calendars, we see that the month of pagan, it happens twice actually. Once it's happened in that decade, from 1830 to 1839. Once it happens on the 17th of February 1832, and the second time this combination comes together is the 13th of February 1835. It can't be 17th of February 1832 because it was the month of Ramadan. 14th of Ramadan. Had his birth been in Ramadan, he would have clearly stated it. I mean, for a promised Messiah and from an Imam Mahdi, it must have been extremely important to state it to the Muslims that, look, my birth happened in the month of Ramadan.
And on a Friday.
So the only other option that we have when this happened, when this combination came together, is the 13th of February, 1835. And that is where we can conclude, although nothing still can be said with certainty, but we've gone through it and we've seen that we're almost certain that this is what the dates were, and this is what the year must have been, because all 4 required combinations have come together. And this is what takes us to the conclusion that the Prophet ﷺ was born on 13th of February 1835.